Hello and welcome back to another episode of the Boropolis podcast. This week, and I'm going to make a point of it because I saw the comment on last week's podcast, I am joined by Nathan, not with Nathan. We're in separate locations. So, to whoever commented that, I'm joined by Nathan. I hope that's better for you. Nathan, a little joke to start off the podcast, smiles on both of our faces. And why not, really, after a 3-0 whopping of Millwall yesterday. And this is the beauty of doing a podcast on a Sunday, because if we'd have recorded on Tuesday or Wednesday night, for example, for a quick fire reaction to our exit of the Carabao Cup, I can imagine the mood would have been significantly different to how it's going to be in this episode. So yeah, plenty to get into. Obviously, transfer window remains. There was two sort of major exciting links, which of course we'll discuss in due course as well. But as we would usually do, I think it's best to just go in chronological order in terms of the events of the week. So going back to that Carabao Cup performance, Nathan, and I'm not going to kind of spend too long. I think it's been and gone. But I mean, there was certainly an element of the fan base, and not me. I've said on here to you, to anyone that I speak to, and I would totally admit, fair weather cup fan, you can throw that at me. I'm never one in the early rounds of the cup where I'm devastated if we go out. Obviously, you kind of want it to continue the momentum. And surprisingly, I felt Rob Edwards did actually stick to his word and went relatively strong with the team. But I mean, in terms of the performance, well, scoreline in particular, it was a pitiful evening's work, if you can even call it that.
Yeah, it definitely was, wasn't it, Chris? Yeah, obviously a couple of changes to the team, changes in midfield, particularly with McCabe and Kante playing in there. Change at left wing back with George McCormick, changes in goal as well. Dale Fry came out of the team. Yeah, but I think what was most surprising was most of the team staying the same, especially that front line as well, especially with Millwall to come on the Saturday. But I felt for particularly the first half an hour, we were pretty abject. Obviously, going 2-0 down in the game. Doncaster were miles on top with their intensity, the quickness of play, getting up the pitch. They'd constantly spread it out wide to Gibson on this left hand side, and the left back would constantly be bombing on and giving him an option up the line. And obviously, both the goals in the first half come from deflections, which is a little bit unfortunate, but Doncaster would definitely value for their lead going into half time. I felt that the last sort of 10-15 minutes of the first half, sorry, we did grow into it a little bit and have a couple of chances. Bergzorg hit the post, and there was another good save from their goalkeeper from Bergzorg as well. But yeah, on the whole, first half really poor. Expected a couple of changes in the second. We did see them a little bit later on, not immediately at the break,
Yeah.
but on the whole, really, we were really poor, and for long periods of the game, we were toothless against a League One side who obviously they've just come up from League Two. But despite that, and me giving them praise for the momentum, they did make 11 changes as well on the
Yeah,
night.
yeah, that
So
kind of played into the, loss of numerous heads across Teesside. There was a lot of concern, and I think rightfully so. It was not a good performance by any stretch, and as I say, we were relatively strong, but they made so many changes. I think it was very much a case of, and interestingly, yesterday Rob Edwards did speak of that performance, or blip as he called it, was a mentality thing. It wasn't a technical, it wasn't a tactical thing. I think there's a few elements of the performance where I did think this shape doesn't look great. I thought the
yeah,
press was completely off. Obviously, the first time that Kante and McCabe had played together as a two, I felt like Doncaster just had so much space in the middle of the pitch. George McCormick looked a long way off making senior first team appearances for Middlesbrough Football Club, but there was other performances that were really really poor. As you say, the forward line, Bergsorg had a couple of chances, but that just looked, again, Tommy Conway isolated. And you kind of did feel, dear me, after some of our concerns that we'd raised last week, especially in terms of creating chances and just really basically providing Tommy Conway with any level of service, it was another game that went by where you thought, this could be a long season for Middlesbrough's number nine if it is going to be Tommy Conway. But yeah, I think it's interesting to talk about it now because obviously with the benefit of hindsight, you see the reaction and you see exactly what you want from Middlesbrough yesterday. So you kind of almost think it doesn't matter. But let's not forget it was dreadful, but also like you say, Doncaster. You can only play what's in front of you, and ultimately they've a very much changed Doncaster side have rolled up and beat a Middlesbrough team that, for the most part, it would be quite plausible that that could be, barring probably McCormack and McCabe, could be a starting team for Middlesbrough in the Championship at the moment. So, yeah, I'm not kind of getting too bogged down by it. It was frustrating, and I get why at the time, having conceded goals in the manner that we did, people were angry, but I can't pretend that I want to talk about it for any longer or sort of, as I say, get bogged down by it because, there's been so much good that's happened since then, really.
Well, I agree, but I think it's important to touch on just the fact that the shape did look off, as you say, especially the way that our midfield just got constantly
It was getting
by
bypassed again, yeah.
it got bypassed again and again and again, and there was a massive gap between that back five and the midfield too. And I felt that despite people looking at that midfield and thinking that's okay, McCabe, young lad with high potential, really, the next one off the conveyor belt coming through the academy. And next to a new signing as well in Kante, thinking that that's okay in a capable midfield. But I just felt like, having watched it, that it was probably unfair in the end to put those two next to each other.
Yeah, you almost,
Best
because of the
keeper.
fact that we've paid a fee for him and obviously there's that level of excitement after his little cameo against Swansea, you also do forget how young Kante actually is as well, really.
A young player who has come into English football, has played a 20-minute period, and is next to McCabe, who's played maybe a handful of games. I felt that in the end, that was probably a poor decision to play them both next to each other. But yeah, on the whole, I think that a lot of the reaction to the result is sort of boiled down to the fact that, not that we've been knocked out the cup or anything like that, but
Yeah.
the manner of the performance and in the end the manner of the result. Conceding four at home against any team is absolutely disgusting.
It's one that, had yesterday have been poor, I'm sure our criticisms would have been a lot louder and we'd have probably dissected it more. But as I say, I think they've almost got themselves out of jail yesterday because just sheerly down to how good of a performance yesterday was. Obviously, as we always touch on, there's been all sorts of kind of activity this week. It really heated up on Thursday night, but of course, the one thing that you want if you can't have almost a game the next day whilst the transfer window's still open after a load of negativity and a bad result is another signing, something to quickly get the fans back on side and that little bit of positivity. And that's exactly what we got. First thing on Wednesday morning, there was reports in Holland that Middlesbrough had agreed a fee for Sonjay Hansen, obviously a long time target, someone that we've reported the interest was kind of out there back in, I think even before the Callum Britton interest was sort of first being reported. So yeah, it's been long-standing interest, and of course it did feel like a few dominoes have probably fallen into place because of the fact that Rav van den Berg has now moved on and that's been confirmed. Of course, we got the details later on that day of the fee and what Middlesbrough have managed to get out of that deal. So, yeah, I mean, in terms of, I think in fairness, Vandenberg, we didn't know the details of the fee, but we kind of knew he was going to be confirmed on Wednesday. Just firstly touching on it because we've done this topic to death, and we've only done 3 episodes of the podcast this season. But now we know the final figures. A good piece of business by Middlesbrough Football Club.
Yeah, definitely in the sort of looking back and knowing that you've signed a player for 250 grand and you've been able to flip him for upwards of 10 million pounds after 2 seasons, it's great business for the football club, really. And I think that had it been a case of there being genuine interest after his first season, you'd have probably got a higher fee. But obviously, last season, Vandenberg was hit and miss both in performances but also in availability as well. But yeah, I think that it's a good piece of business for the football club, and given the sort of the back three that we're seeing at the minute, there's no doubt in my mind that Vandenberg could fit in that back three, and he would do if he was available and would want to play for the football club. But he wants to move on and he's already probably looking ahead and thinking he's in the next stage of his development now. He's had experience in it under his belt playing in the championship, and he's got to step up and play for a team in the top division in Germany, in Cologne, who just got promoted. So yeah, best of luck to him. And obviously it's being reported as well that we've got quite a substantial sell-on clause in that deal as well.
Yeah, just touching on it. Obviously, I know there's been a lot of discussion about kind of basically did Rav Vandenberg become bad overnight? I've very much always been like a defender of. I think people forget his age. I think yes, last season wasn't his best, but I just couldn't look past how good he was in his first season. And I would still say I do honestly think that people kind of went a little bit overboard with he almost become overrated kind of significantly. But yeah, it's by the by, as you say. Interestingly, there was mention of Chelsea interest and their multi-club model potentially being loaned to Strasbourg or vice versa, him going there initially. In the end, it was Cologne. Quite a big outlay for a newly promoted team in Germany, which was a bit of a shock because I think only a few days before there was talk of sort of £7 or £8 million bids. And I think ultimately to get over, well, just over £11 million, and as you say, what was so crucial in this deal, to get that large sell on percentage was good, a good business, very good business. And look, I know it doesn't make too much of a difference in terms of we were never under the impression it was a big fee to begin with, but the fact that it was actually only 250 grand that we paid for him, I think everyone was under the impression it was more towards 1 million. So yeah, that extra bit of profit for PSR purposes or the books or whichever way you want to look at it is of course very nice. Back onto Hansen, of course, as I say, the reports come out early Wednesday morning, and it was announced by lunchtime, I think. It was very much a case of Boro have done what they have done so well over the last few years, and kind of basically within, I mean, this one was especially quick, but usually Middlesbrough are not linked with a player at least by credible sources. I mean, they're linked with a different player every other day by EFL analysis, and usually that's a heap of dog shit. But in terms of credible links, when you know that there will be something in it, usually the player signs very, very quickly after that. And we got the announcement, and going back to my initial point, that one was announced, long-standing interest, something that Rob Edwards then spoke about in his press conference about it was basically one of the first names that the recruitment team brought up to me as soon as kind of those initial discussions were going on. I think probably reading between the lines, it's a player that even if Michael Carrick had still been in charge, it was a player that the club wanted to get a hold of. Obviously, there was interest from Ajax last season, and yeah, it's nice to see that Middlesbrough have been in a position where quite clearly they've had a broad agreement for a long time, and the player hasn't kicked up a fuss and said, "Well, I'm not willing to wait. I want my move, and I'm not really bothered if you can't sort your side of the bargain out. Then I'll go and seek out another move." It does seem that he's very much viewed this as a great opportunity for himself and being willing to be patient. And obviously, again, after seeing him yesterday, it's very early signs, but an exciting signing and someone in terms of player profile who I think we very, very much need that little bit of pace and directness in the forward line.
Yeah, 100%. Having seen us in the first two games of the season, it was apparent that we need pace, we need directness, we need someone that is either going to get to the byline and put a cross into the box, or just someone who's going to take on a man and try and drive into the box and get us a cross for Conway to tap in. But yeah, we've been sold that Hansen is a player that can play on the wing, but also in one of those 10 positions, which is good. Players that are versatile and can play different positions is important. But I think from everything that we've seen so far in clips, that he is more of a winger. I think
Yeah.
someone who can take on a fullback and burn them for pace. Really, he looks very quick. Yeah, obviously we saw a little bit of him yesterday and a little bit of his magic, so we'll get onto that a little bit later. But it looks like a good signing.
Following that, even more positive news. And I mean, like London buses, it happens probably once every transfer window. You get one exciting link, and then another one is there within minutes. You wait days and days and days, sometimes weeks and weeks and weeks, and you get two in the space of 10 minutes. And
It was about 10:30 as well, wasn't it?
yeah, yeah, which even stranger, the fact that they'd both kind of come out at that point. But in terms of Boro having deals lined up or money to spend anyway, money in their pockets from the sale of Rav van den Berg, are you going to try and pronounce both of these players?
Yeah, we'll go for it. I'm all right with his surname, but it's just first name. Sverre Nypan from Manchester City,
It's a
obviously
really good effort.
just signed for them this summer from Rosenborg for 12.5 million quid. He's only 18, but a central midfielder or attacking midfielder. And obviously, you've got to have something about you for Man City to be signing you at that age as well for that fee. So, in that sense, you're thinking, right, okay, he has a lot of pedigree about him, a lot of potential. I'm thinking he's definitely got a lot of technical ability. You can see that from the clips that people have sort of shared on social media and seen on YouTube, and there's plenty of excitement about him because of that. Obviously, that link came from Fabrizio, our mate. So
Yeah, we're pals now, aren't we? We're on first name terms, I think.
yeah, so that was one that you think will happen in
Yeah,
the coming
it
days.
was a case of here we go soon. And I've since read, although it was Fabrizio Romano that obviously broke the story, that the plan is from the City side of things that because of his age, they were very keen on him having a UK loan or a loan in England because they will be able to, after 3 years, I believe, have him classed as a homegrown player, which is
Right.
obviously really big for Premier League clubs and their quotas that they've got to fill. So I think, strangely enough, I had read or seen something on social media weeks back that I think his dad may have done an interview and basically said along the lines of there's already a loan agreement that's kind of in the works, or we have an idea of where he's going to spend next season. And of course, it seems like that's going to be us. And I just want to say, for the whole narrative around in the summer, well, we won't be able to sign exciting players. No top clubs are going to give us their kids anymore because Michael Carrick's not here. I think that argument is quite quickly being put to bed if we do get this one over the line, because he is widely considered as one of the most exciting youngsters in world football, really.
He has played 70 games already
Yeah.
in Norway for Rosenborg, so he has got experience under his belt.
And then also from very, very good French sources, we got a link to. I'll try this one, Nathan, but you can correct me, okay? Czech Sabali?
I think you're about bang on there, Chris.
So we got this one initially reported by a journalist from, I think it's Footy Mercado or something like that. Again, I've probably butchered the name. Anyway, a very respected source, and then we also got it from the same journalist that broke the Kante story, and it was a case of agreement almost in place. That, of course, a permanent deal. I think immediately everyone thought that's the lad that scored against England for Senegal a few months back. But yeah, a lot of mention of him sort of being a winger, a left winger, but actually it seems like he's played a lot of his football more centrally as a number nine. In that sense, of course, despite all of the excitement and then Dom coming out and saying that actually Middlesbrough are at a point where they have made their best offer possible, that they would be willing to pay for someone that is in the last year of their contract. And it's at the moment a case of, I feel like there's a bit of gamesmanship going on here in the sense of we're saying, well, that's us, but also they're saying, no, we still want a little bit more. You kind of think if it rumbles on any further that, like we see in so many cases, the club are ultimately going to want to get the best price that they can before they either lose him to a pre-contract in January or potentially risk losing him for nothing. So there's not sort of been too much since, but it's one that you think by the time that we record this podcast next week could well have probably still happened or at least may happen before the deadline. I think just in terms of profile, not very tall. And as a number nine, I know we spoke last week specifically about Conway and his play in terms of his back to goal work. And obviously, when we are going to be slightly more direct, or at least I don't want to say more direct because we're not pumping balls up to Conway, but I think more pragmatic in our approach that it's okay to hook a ball into the channels if you really need to and there's nothing else on. I guess a bit of a surprise because I think we were all expecting the next striker link to be a big physical lump that is going to be more than comfortable with two arms out and three centre halves hanging off his shoulders.
Yeah, bring Big Uche back. Um, but no, I think this link caught me by surprise a little bit because having looked at his stats for the last season and seen that he played 37 games for Mets and scored 15, I'm thinking, what, like a pretty good return for a winger. However, looking again at his overall sort of career, it looks like last season could have been an anomaly having looked at his numbers over his career period, but having played in a different position as a number nine, you're thinking, well, maybe that's just a case of him being intelligent, picking up sort of good positions in the box, making good runs, things like that. But definitely from his build, I'm looking at him and I'm thinking, you do look more like a winger, someone who can knock the ball past someone and burn them for pace more than
Yeah.
anything.
Or at least in a sort of inside forward, which
Yeah,
also I would say, and as well, in fairness, kind of was brought up because it was such a quick succession of links just randomly on Thursday night at half ten, like you said. It did immediately raise question marks about longer term plans formation wise. And okay, yes, we've had success with the formation, the three or the five, and wing backs. Of course, it did make you think. Well, if we're going to be bringing in a player from Manchester City on loan, who's cost them 12.5 million, you would expect that there will be some kind of acceptance from a Middlesbrough side that Manchester City will be expecting him to play football. So, A, where's he going to fit? And then when we got this other link, it was a case of okay, there's a conversation on if he's a winger or not. We'd obviously signed Hansen, who, as you say, looks way more comfortable as a natural winger, but of course can't play in either of those tens. And then in Rob Edwards' press conference, he did reference 4-2-3-1 and 4-3-3. Yes, we've had real success, and I've really liked the look, especially in how we defend. but it does make you think that Rob Edwards is not just going to be, as the Luton fans deemed him last season and are keen to tell everyone, completely stubborn and has no ability to change his shape at all. Yes, we haven't seen it yet, but he has hinted at it on numerous occasions now that he would be more than willing to potentially change shape depending on players that are brought in, who goes, etc.
Yeah, and I think although we haven't seen it sort of from the off in games, we have seen him alter formation with changes in game, which I suppose, like in the Doncaster game, for example, obviously chasing the game and trying to get a couple of goals back late on, trying to force something. He brings on Marcus Force, and we go sort of a, well, I think he described it as a 4-2-4, but yeah, more of a an attacking formation, throwing some bodies forward. But yeah, I think that we are recruiting in a way where I'm looking at the build of players and the profile of players and thinking it looks like we're recruiting wingers, and these players are playing sort of off Conway at the minute, but it looks like these players could provide the width and the ability to beat a man that could be useful for other games where you have to, well, where we're breaking teams down really, because in the first sort of two games that we've played so far this season, we haven't really been in a position where we've been dominating the ball like we were last season. For large parts, we've been very much sort of,
Transitional.
yeah, transitional, just sitting in. And to be fair, the Millwall game especially, very sort of counter-attacking, weren't we? So yeah, obviously that's very beneficial to have pace and directness on the counter-attack. And the Hansen signing and the Sabali link are both definitely fitting into that mold and style of play. So yeah, both promising links, I suppose. Yeah, obviously a little bit of concern about both signings in terms of Nypan fitting into the league, and well, same for Sabali as well. But in terms of where Sabali would play, I don't think that he would be the centre forward until we sign him and he scores 15.
Yeah, and I think also just a little another strand of conversation in terms of those two links, especially. It also did make me think, well, okay, we've, in terms of left backs or left wing backs, we've been linked with Max Arfston.
Yeah,
That one's gone completely quiet, but it was very much a case of this is a left winger turned left wing back, but predominantly a left winger, not a left back. And we did get the link to Charlie Taylor earlier on this week, just gone by. Now, that has just been described as loose interest. I don't think there's been any official approach or anything like that. But even with that, it ties in with the idea that maybe there's one eye on moving to a four potentially and having more a left wing, a left back, sorry, rather than a dribbly left winger who just fits into the formation, which is kind of what we're seeing with Silvera at the moment. What's very intriguing, and going back to me completely getting splinters in my arse and not making a prediction, Rob Edwards was keen even on Friday to say we are still very much expecting a couple, and it wasn't a case of one or two, it was three or four. So there's been links with obviously very loose links, we should say, so we're not kind of going to get too drawn into conversation, but we've been linked with goalkeepers as well. Panda from Hull, again from Alan Nixon. That one has also been backed up by Baz Cooper from the Hull side, so there's clearly a little bit of interest there. But yeah, I'm sure in terms of transfers and things like that, we'll hear more and we'll have a better idea of what the long term solution is going to be, or Rob Edwards' go to formation is going to be moving forwards. Millwall, then, I'm not going to lie, and I said at the beginning of the podcast, I was not expecting that, but wow, what a pleasant surprise. In terms of the team, Kante come in to the midfield alongside Aidan Morris, and Hayden Hackney was pushed a little bit further forward alongside Whitaker in that 10 role. I know we spoke last week about how we actually quite like the look of that in the second half against Swansea to see the game out. And I like the idea, to be honest. I thought it made sense. Obviously, there was never going to be any changes to the back five, but I felt like, yes, Kante come off at half time, but I did feel like it worked. I think in terms of how we defended, we were very, very much, especially for the opening 20 minutes, under the cosh. It felt like an opening 20 minutes of a game that Michael Carrick's team would have just crumbled under. And we didn't. We stuck in there, a little bit fortuitous, don't get me wrong. Luke Ayling makes a huge block off the line, and Negley has a good chance from a header. But Middlesbrough stayed in the game, and in credit to him, Kante was a part of that, doing what he's so great at and what's evident already, being a horrible little shit to play against in midfield. Someone that when you're playing against him, you hate it because he's just constantly nibbling away at your heels, winning second balls, and that is something that I thought we'd done extremely well. And in his post-match interview, explaining the change and explaining why he did what he did and was proactive rather than reactive. Thank the Lord, Rob Edwards and AD and H. He made that substitution at half time because he felt that basically we look good on the transition, we look good on the counter. We just want. Oh, I'm saying we as though I'm part of the coaching staff. Rob Edwards wanted a little bit more quality just for those moments where we were turning the ball over in the centre of the pitch in the form of Hayden Hackney, who could basically just make that key pass before unlocking a Sanjay Hansen, who of course plays a huge part in the first goal. Obviously, we're not going to get onto the second half just yet, but yeah, I was so pleased because I said yesterday, in last week's podcast, not yesterday, sorry. I want us to go and front up and basically be the polar opposite of what Michael Carrick's team were at Millwall away last season, and that's exactly what we were. We did ride our luck a couple of times, but for the most part, other than that first 20 minutes, it was almost like a controlled defending, similar to kind of the closing stages of the Swansea game, where yes, they were putting balls into our box, but we were making first contacts. We second contacts, excellent. Second balls, there was a real tenacity and just a will to stay in the game. And as much as the second half and three excellent goals, that was for me just as pleasing as what the goals were and how good some of those were in the second half.
Yeah, I think everyone knows that when you're going to play Millwall, particularly away from home, that you're going to have to weather a storm a little bit. And in the opening stages of the game, Boro did that, limited them really to only that massive chance which Luke Ayling clears off the line. And we also created a little bit of our own going forward as well. Obviously, Silvera whips that ball into the box, and Whittaker should get there, really.
Yeah, he's just got to kind of throw his body at it, not necessarily his head, just literally just jump at the ball and try and make contact.
Yeah. So that's a big opportunity. And then obviously the sort of talking point towards the end of the first half as well, which is Whittaker sets Conway away and he knocks the ball past the goalkeeper and has a little has a little fall to the floor, appeals to the referee, and they weren't just waved away. He was given a yellow card for simulation. I think you stand on one side of the fence and I stand on the other for this one, Chris. I think personally he's trying to buy it.
Yeah, I think, like you say, he's definitely initiating the contact. What I would say is, if it's given against Middlesbrough this season, I'm absolutely furious. However, the argument that I would say is there is contact. And yes, it's minimal, and he is trying his best for the keeper to make contact. But he's touched him. And when you're running at that pace, I feel like the slightest contact can knock you off balance. And I can see both sides, but I would always go of the opinion of he's past the goalkeeper. Why would he go down? And I get, yes, he's trying to buy a penalty. It's slightly wide, so it's not an easy finish, even if he does stay on his feet. But there is contact there ultimately.
Yeah, I think in the end, we're happy that it doesn't matter.
Yeah, I think it's one of them, isn't it? It really didn't mean anything in the second half. So let's talk about the second half, Nathan. Obviously, we got that change. We saw the introduction and the debut of Sonjay Hansen and Kante come off. And I must say, an absolute perfect change, really, from the coaching staff. They've got this one absolutely spot on. And with the benefit of hindsight, again, of course, you can always say after a win, well, this is what we viewed it as. But I don't think you can argue that, he hasn't been proactive on this one, Rob Edwards, along with his coaching staff, and made the change that they felt was going to give Middlesbrough the best chance of winning the game. And ultimately, those changes have given Middlesbrough the lead and put them in a very good position to go on and win the game. So, massive credit to that.
Having seen the first half, that we were sort of getting more comfortable in the game, that the coaching staff evidently seen enough in that to think, right, well, we've weathered that early storm. We've sort of quietened the crowd down a little bit. Let's sort of show what we're about going forward. And to be fair, what we lacked in the first couple of games was the moments where one of our attacking three players was able to either turn a midfielder or turn a defender and get them, the opposition, running back towards their own goal. And it all comes from Ayling really winning the ball back, reading the game, stepping forward. And to be fair, he does well in that instance. Nearly plays the pass out of play for this goal, but Whittaker's there on the byline and knocks it inside. And then the part in which we get them turned is that Sanche Hansen turn. And I think Whittaker does well initially not to just go on his left foot like he would usually do. I think he is initially aiming for Hansen,
Yeah.
giving him a little bit of a 1-2. And Hansen sort of on the stretch for it. Luckily doesn't make any contact. And then in comes the steaming in, box crashing midfielder Hayden Hackney. And yeah, slams home a fantastic finish, side footed into the corner. And again, we've seen this previously come back to bite Middlesbrough on the arse with some of our players doing celebrations like this. But when we talk about the character of the group in these celebrations, which is standing up to the challenge of playing away at Millwall and showing some bollocks and puffing your chest out and giving it a bit back. And Hackney slams that one in the corner and wheels away straight away and giving it to them bods behind the goal. Yeah,
Yeah.
good. Yeah, good. Anyone else in this division wants it? Yeah, good.
That's what 2 wins does to you people. He's got a us against everyone mentality. He's feeding into Rob's PR. But yeah, I do think it's an interesting point in all seriousness, and I don't want to go all Brendan Rodgers, but in terms of that key word character, it's almost like a quiet confidence that you've seen in this opening 2 games where you notice in celebrations that they're all together, everyone's leaping on top of each other, but it's I don't want to overanalyze anything, but it feels like a quiet confidence that they they actually all really believe in what they're doing at the moment. And yes, it's still very early days, but in that kind of environment, and yes, people might say it's an easy comment to make, but I think it's an important one to make. Michael Carrick's Middlesbrough team do not win that game. They probably get to the point where Middlesbrough had scored, and they then invite a little bit more pressure on, and ultimately either draw the game or end up losing it. And I think yesterday, some of the unsung heroes, I think Sammy Silvera again had another good game, especially, he's playing up against a centre back really playing right back in Kramer. who is a big physical lump. Again, there was times where they are switching it basically for him to make first contact, and Silvera challenged really well with him. Unsung heroes, Sol Bryn doesn't have huge saves to make, but comes out and makes big catches and big punches in the second half just to take off that pressure. Luke Ayling, I must say, Millwall fans despise him. But in that right centre back role, and I know you said his reading of the game, what I would say is in the first 10 minutes, he gave two absolute hospital passes that could have really put us in a bad place. But he recovered from that. And Dale Fry and Alfie Jones, it's 2 games in, but the pair of them, I just hope that they can, as a duo, and whoever is the third centre half that plays alongside them two, they are non-negotiable first name on the team sheet territory because they've both been absolutely superb. Alfie Jones, not only does he get his first Boro goal, but yesterday again, that conversation around aerial ability and duels. I don't think I remember him losing a duel, to be honest. Just an absolute colossus at the back. Dale Fry leading by example again, and did have the captain's armband again. I know Rob wants to share it out and wants that leadership from everyone, but it was Dale that got it again. And Neil Maddison made an interesting point yesterday about how some players don't like that extra responsibility, but some players flourish in it and it brings out a different side of them. And I think from that interview that Dale Fry did on the opening day, he clearly now sees himself as a leader in this group, as someone that's played a lot of football for Middlesbrough Football Club, and he's a senior figure in that dressing room, and he's just taken to that captaincy role like a duck to water. So long may that continue. But yeah, I've went off on a little bit of a tangent there from just analysing Hayden Hackney giving it to the home fans. But even in terms of good attributes that we've seen from this Middlesbrough team that sometimes get overlooked. Set pieces. We've scored from another set piece. But again, there's that tenacity. There's that real want to go and make the first contact because it's not only about a delivery into the box because we've scored off a delivery yesterday from Hayden Hackney. We scored off a delivery last week from Morgan Whittaker. Both players were at our football club last season. But there's got to be a want to go and make first contact. And yes, okay, there's positional sense, zones in an attacking sense of who's going to go to what area, different variations of deliveries, different types of deliveries. But in this game yesterday again, it feels very much like a mentality thing of, yeah, I want to go and head the ball into the goal. I want to make first contact. I don't care if I'm going up against a 7 foot Jay Cooper or however tall he is. I want to try and get the ball in the opposition net. And there's a few ricochets. Luke Ayling does well. And in fairness to Alfie Jones, takes one touch on the swivel and finishes like a prime R9.
Yeah, it's really nice to sort of look at our foot mob starting 11 and see both centre halves or like out and out centre halves already have a goal to the name at this stage of the season. Obviously, we did nearly go full Borough before this with Coburn hitting both posts, but we'll
A
skip
little slice of luck.
we'll skip past it. It's a little slice of luck, and it's nice to know that we've absolutely had Millwall's pants down, which is really nice after the whole George Savile debacle of a couple of seasons ago. So we got them back for that, which is a bonus. But yeah, it's nice to have a different avenue of scoring goals, as I mentioned last week when we scored with Fries. But again, this one's a scrappy one, and it's nice. It's nice when it's your team scoring a scrappy goal because you know that there will be a Millwall podcast somewhere where they're trying to analyse that goal, saying their defenders have to do better. But from a Borough point of view, it's Alfie Jones throwing his body at the ball for first contact, Ayling sort of scrapping and ratting about in the box, and the ball just takes a nice ricochet, lands at Jones's feet, and he just sort of stabs it in the roof of the net. And again, analysis of celebration. All three centre halves as a defensive unit first over to each other, congratulating each other. Luke Ayling screaming at the top of his lungs, giving it stacks. And my favourite photo of the weekend is the one of Hayden at the front and Della in behind him, giving it absolute full throttle.
It is nice. It is really nice to see that little bit of shithousery. We all love it deep down, and it's usually something that comes back and bites us in the arse. And in this occasion, it hasn't. So you've got to enjoy it. Dan Barlasser hasn't played a minute this season, and there's an absolutely sensational photograph of him laughing his head off at a middle-aged man, probably offering out all of the substitutes and technical staff and analysts and all sorts. So that, if anyone's seen that, it's terrific, and I would definitely encourage people to go and try and find that if you haven't, because it's a pretty really funny one. And then in terms of impact substitutions, exactly what you want from your manager, a manager's dream. Two of his substitutions combine for the third to wrap up 3 points. Finn Azar's back after his injury in pre-season, and it's sort of, I guess, Finn Azar's at his best, really. That little bit of quality that he's got, that he does have to unlock a defence. Yes, okay, Millwall are chasing the game at that point. There's bigger gaps, but Della does well to get in between their two centre halves and just a lovely, delicate dink straight into his path. His first touch is quite good, in fairness, and then sort of Richarlison esque, almost a bit of a sort of sideways scissor kick into the floor to make it just skip over the goalkeeper. And then again, wonderful celebrations. And at that point, I thought, well, in fact, it was my dad that said to me, surely we can't even lose from this point.
Well, yeah, definitely. I think as well for this goal particularly, shout out to Callum Britton for his run that takes away a Millwall midfielder who was going to charge down Azaz. It pulls him away. Azaz has the time and space to sort of pick his head up and clip that ball over the top into Delano Berg's organ. It's a case of Finn Azaz is back, fit and available in the championship. Another GA to his tally, but Millwall must be finishing in the well below 10th because that's all Finn Azaz does, isn't it? Against the mid-table fodder. We'll wait and see where they finish this season. I'll hazard a guess of clutching on the coattails of the playoffs.
Yeah, you did say that last week, to be fair. That's usually where they end up. And another team who will certainly be aiming for that part of the table, Norwich, a trip to Carrow Road. I think no game is ever a free hit in this division, and I'm certainly not saying that. But it makes whatever result next week, and I certainly don't want us to ease off. I want this momentum to continue. I want us to go 46 games unbeaten. But it certainly eases the nerves and kind of calms things down, because following that midweek drubbing in the cup, and it was important that we got off to a good start in the league, and we did. But you looked at the fixture list before the international break and thought, this could get quite ugly quite quickly, to be honest. And it just eases that element of, oh, Middlesbrough are going to start terribly again. And long may it continue, by the way. But I'd love to know when the last time that we won the opening two games of the season was.
I'll tell you,
Go on.
1994.
So I mean, there you go. It's well, it's unheard of for me and you. We've never seen this before. So look, as I say, I want it to continue, but again, let's be totally realistic. And like I was going into Millwall, I'm expecting a very difficult game. And although it's somewhere where Middlesbrough have had quite a fair bit of success over the last few years, recent history, it's still going to be a very, very difficult game. And of course, you're playing against pretty much the best striker in the league.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah. Norwich is always one of those grounds where you think could do without this.
Yeah,
It's uh it's one of those where they're always a side that is pretty good, full of technically decent footballers, players that can excite and the usual. I mean, in recent years in the Championship, they've always had a top centre forward in Pookie and Sargent over the last sort of decade, really. Going there, they've obviously lost the first game of the season at home to Millwall and then won yesterday afternoon away at Portsmouth. They also went with a back three yesterday, so sort of matching each other up in that sense, which is interesting. They obviously signed Matthias Kvistgarten, who was very sort of he was one of those players that a lot of Twitter tacticos were very sort of surprised to see landed at Norwich. But to be fair to them, they do pay big fees for players
And big wages by all accounts.
and big wages. Yeah, yeah. I think it was £7 million for Kvistgarten, so that's a good chunk of change for them. But as I say, it's a difficult place to go. As you say, we have been pretty okay there in the last couple of seasons, but obviously last season we went from 3-1 up to absolutely shit in the bed. So this week we have also seen one incredibly poor mentality in the week and have followed that up with a little bit of a change, one where we needed to be resolute, be steely, and be up and at it. And it needs to be hammered down these players' throats and be in their mind that this is the same. This is the same. Despite it not being as hostile of an atmosphere at Norwich, their fans will get behind them. It'll be a sold out Carrow Road as it is every single week there because they always back the team, to be fair to them. And we need to be right on it from minute one once again. Be resolute, bide our time a little bit, and do our business on the break as we have been in the last, well, especially yesterday afternoon. So we'll wait and see. We'll hopefully have a couple of players through the door as well, which will be nice. Hopefully they get the debuts as well. Yeah, it promises to be a very good game. Looking at the fixtures at the start of the season, I said we'd be looking to get 5 points out of 12
Yeah.
in the first four before the first international break. After two games, we've got six on the board, so that was a good, good little shout from me. But I don't want it to stop there. It definitely doesn't want to stop there. Norwich and Sheffield United up next. Norwich, difficult test. Sheffield United, always a difficult test, but a team in turmoil at the minute. Let's attack these two games and see where we end up before the first international break.
Yeah, absolutely. And I guess, to be honest, like you say, in terms of the start, and we've still got a long way to go, and obviously they might bring players in, we might look totally different before we play those, but it certainly looks like a more appealing fixture than what it did under Chris Wilder. So yeah, I don't dislike Sheffield United as much as what I did now because of the fact that he's no longer there. So yeah, that's obviously looking further ahead than Norwich. But like everything that you've just said, it's always a difficult game. It's never going to be a game where you roll up and kind of it's an easy day at the office, another 3-0 job. I'm sure like yesterday. We will have probably a 20-minute spell where you are relying on your Callum Brittons to stop crosses and basically just do the basics really well, which is what I've enjoyed us doing so far. So yeah, I'm excited, and as you say, we might even have a one or two new additions by then. It certainly seems like there's a couple close. To round up, Nathan, obviously you won't be going to the open training session tomorrow, but how about this for a theory? To be honest, I'm going to put it out there because this podcast is going to go out on Monday night. I reckon they announced Nypan or Nipan at the open training session.
It's a bold prediction, and I'm sure
I'll
that
I'll I'll just edit it out tomorrow if it doesn't happen. So it's being kept in if it does. If not, no one will ever hear it. But yeah, in all seriousness, obviously an excellent away victory for Middlesbrough and a nice little bit of momentum and hopefully an upwards curve for Rob Edwards, Middlesbrough, as they had a second win of the season and sit in the heights of second in the Sky Bet Championship table. Can you believe
Well,
it?
as they tick another ground off that has had to witness the Rob Edwards fist pumps in front of an away end.
Yeah, hopefully we get some more of them next week. It would be sensational, wouldn't it?
Oh, it'd be unbelievable. Absolutely unbelievable. And to be fair, anyone making the trip down there next week, hopefully the boys come back with a good result on the board and put a good performance in there. And yeah, hopefully it'll be a nice sunny one down there in which the Boro fans can celebrate and enjoy a nice bank holiday weekend.
Absolutely. Yeah, we've hopefully got that to look forward to. But yeah, as always, just a massive thank you for again all of your support on last week's episode, all of the follows, all of the tags, everything on social media. We do appreciate it, and we obviously love it. We love the excitement of the transfer window. So, as I would always say, make sure that you're following us on Instagram, Twitter, anything like that. And of course, if you like listening to us talk and not just reading our tweets, then you can, of course, subscribe on YouTube and follow us on all your audio platforms as well. So, as always, thank you, Nathan, for your time this evening. And that has been another episode of the Boropolis podcast.